Have you ever wondered what would happen if the bread on the altar, the sacred host, began to bleed? What would it mean if, right before our eyes, heaven broke through the veil of the ordinary and reminded us that God is not a symbol, but alive, right here, waiting, loving, suffering with us? This is not a legend. It's not a medieval myth or a story told to frighten children. It's a Eucharistic miracle, and like every miracle permitted by God, it comes with a message both tender and terrifying. Return to me. Do not forget me. I am here. It began quietly, as divine things often do. No thunder. No lightning. Only the stillness of an ordinary Mass. A priest, faithful yet weary, lifted the host high, behold the Lamb of God. And as he lowered it, his breath caught. Before him, the white host had changed. Blood. Real, thick, living blood flowed from the edges of the consecrated bread. The congregation froze. Some gasped. Others wept. The priest trembled, tears welling in his eyes, as he whispered again, "This is my body, given up for you." In that moment, heaven seemed to break open. Time itself stood still. And from the silence of the Eucharist came a voice, not of sound, but of presence. It was as if Christ himself, wounded yet radiant, stood among them once more, pleading not with words, but with his very heart. When the Church investigates a Eucharistic miracle, it does not do so lightly. Every fiber of the host is tested, studied, preserved. Science seeks proof, faith seeks meaning. But time and again, the results tell the same story. The blood that appears is human, of AB blood type, the same found on the Shroud of Turin, and in other Eucharistic miracles around the world. Coincidence? Or is heaven repeating the same truth again and again because humanity keeps forgetting? Every drop of that blood whispers, "I am alive. I am here. You have forgotten me. But I have never forgotten you." These miracles are not meant to entertain. They are not proofs for the curious. They are the last cries of a wounded love. The voice of the Sacred Heart, calling his children home before it's too late. Let's be honest. Our age does not deny God outright, it simply ignores him. We scroll. We hurry. We plan our days down to the minute. But where is time for the one who gave us breath? Even in our churches, silence has been replaced with noise. Adoration with distraction. And so, in his mercy, God acts. When words fail to move us, he speaks through signs. When sermons no longer stir hearts, he bleeds before our eyes. In the face of indifference, the Eucharist cries out. And every miracle, every drop of sacred blood, is heaven's way of saying, "Do not let my sacrifice be forgotten." The hidden fire of the altar. The altar has always been a place of sacrifice. Not of symbols, but of real offering. In the ancient days, fire consumed the gift. In the New Covenant, love consumes the host. Each Mass is Calvary made present. Not a replay, but a re-entry into the eternal moment of Christ's self-giving. And yet, so many of us attend out of habit. We kneel with bodies but not with hearts. We receive without awe, without tears, without trembling love. And so, sometimes, the host itself reveals what we have forgotten. That this bread is not bread. That this cup is not wine. It is him. The same Jesus who hung on the cross. Who felt the nails pierce his flesh. Who whispered, "Father, forgive them." He is here, silent but alive. Pleading with our generation to look again. Every Eucharistic miracle carries a wound. A wound caused by sin, by forgetfulness, by desecration. When the host bleeds, it is not just a marvel, it is a message of pain. In one miracle, the host was stolen and found days later, bleeding in the mud. In another, a priest struggling with doubt watched the consecrated bread turn into real flesh before his eyes. In yet another, the chalice overflowed with blood during adoration. Each time, heaven intervened, not to frighten, but to call. To awaken us from the sleep of routine and remind us. You receive not a thing, but a person. You consume not a symbol, but a Savior. This is why the Church teaches Eucharistic reparation. To offer love for the wounds of neglect. To kneel in adoration where others walk away. To whisper, "I love you," where others say nothing. Because every act of love heals a wound in the heart of Christ. Every act of reverence becomes balm on his bleeding presence. The miracle of faith. Faith is not seeing. It is believing before seeing. When we come before the Eucharist, we stand at a crossroads. Will we treat this as bread or as God? Will we kneel out of tradition or out of love? In one story, a young boy was brought to adoration for the first time. He didn't know theology. He didn't understand transubstantiation. But when he looked at the host, he whispered, "Jesus, you're hiding in there, aren't you?" That is faith. Pure, childlike, luminous faith. The kind heaven treasures most. And perhaps that is why so many Eucharistic miracles happen in small, humble places. Not cathedrals filled with grandeur, but in quiet parishes, remote towns, and simple chapels, where hearts still believe. Each miracle of the Eucharist carries two truths, mercy and warning. Mercy, because God still reveals himself, even to a doubting generation. Warning, because such manifestations often precede times of trial. When Jesus appeared in bleeding hosts or luminous signs, it was often during periods of moral collapse, spiritual coldness, or widespread unbelief. It is as if heaven is crying out, "Return while there is still time. My mercy still flows, but soon justice will speak." Yet even this justice is not vengeance, it is love seeking to purify. The same love that bled on the cross now bleeds again in the Eucharist. Hoping that we, at last, will understand. Imagine Christ standing before you right now. Not distant. Not hidden behind bread or gold. But right there, eyes filled with mercy, voice trembling with longing. Saying, "Do you love me? Will you not stay with me 1 hour?" That question still echoes through every chapel, every tabernacle. It waits in the silence of every church, in the flicker of every sanctuary lamp. When you pass a church, do you stop to greet him? When you receive communion, do you realize heaven has entered you? Do you understand, really understand, that you have touched God? He is waiting. Not in anger, but in infinite patience. Longing for hearts that will recognize him again. Every great renewal in the Church began at the feet of the Eucharist. When the world grew cold, God raised up souls of fire. Saints like Street Clare, Saint Francis, Saint Peter Julian Amard, and Saint Carlo Acutis, who rekindled the world's faith in the real presence. And maybe this is our time to do the same. Maybe these miracles are heaven's way of inviting us to begin again. To rebuild not churches, but hearts. Because the Eucharist is not just a sacrament. It is a heartbeat. The very pulse of divine life in the world. When that heartbeat is forgotten, the world grows cold. But when it is remembered, adored, loved, grace begins to flow like rivers again. This is the cry of the Eucharist. A cry that pierces time, silence, and human indifference. It is a cry not of anger, but of love. Come back to me. I am here. My heart still beats for you. When God wants to speak to the world, He doesn't always use thunder. Sometimes He uses fire. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that purifies. It is the same fire that burned in the bush before Moses, the same that descended upon the apostles, and the same fire that hides in the Eucharist today. The miracles of the Eucharist are not just marvels. They are warnings wrapped in love. Because whenever the world grows numb, when hearts grow cold and indifferent, God allows His love to burn again, visibly, unmistakably. And in every drop of blood, in every luminous host, there is one message that echoes through the centuries. Return to the fire. Let my love purify you. Every Mass is an encounter with divine fire. But most of the time, it burns unseen. When the priest raises the host, when he whispers the words of consecration, he is holding in his hands not a mere symbol, but the flame of heaven itself. The saints understood this. That's why St. Catherine of Siena once said, "If you could see what I see when the priest holds up the host, you would die of love." She wasn't exaggerating. Because that fire, the fire of Christ's sacrifice, consumes everything that is impure, everything that is false, everything that is unworthy of love. And yet, it does not destroy. It transforms. This is the paradox of divine fire. It burns not to punish, but to heal. That is why, when a host bleeds, or glows, or remains incorrupt for centuries, it is not God trying to impress us, it is God trying to reach us. He is saying, "You have turned cold, and I want to warm you again." Once, the Eucharist was adored like the beating heart of Christ. Now, in many places, it is forgotten. Left in locked chapels, hidden behind dusty curtains. Visited by few, ignored by many. How strange that we can fill stadiums for games. But the living God waits alone behind a golden door. There was a time when people knelt in tears before the Blessed Sacrament, when hearts trembled to receive Him. But now, we rush through communion as if it were routine. We forget that in that small white host is the same Jesus who died on the cross. Body, blood, soul, and divinity. And so, sometimes, the fire of His love manifests, visibly. It breaks through our indifference. It bleeds. It glows. Not to condemn us, but to awaken us. Because love cannot remain silent when it is forgotten. It must speak, even if through miracles. In the 8th century, in a small town called Lanciano, a monk was celebrating Mass. He was a good man, but he doubted. He wondered, deep inside, could this really be Christ? Could this small piece of bread truly become His body? As he spoke the words of consecration, his hands trembled. And before his very eyes, the host turned into real flesh, and the wine into real blood. The congregation fell to their knees. The monk wept uncontrollably. Over 1,200 years later, the flesh and blood still exist, preserved, untouched by decay. And when scientists examined them, they found something extraordinary. The flesh is human heart tissue. The blood is human, type AB. The heart of Christ revealed itself through the very mystery of His sacrifice. He could have chosen any miracle, light, sound, fragrance. But He chose the heart. Because that is what the Eucharist is. The Sacred Heart of Jesus, beating in silence, waiting for love to respond. The saints did not merely believe in the Eucharist. They lived it. They were people set ablaze by divine love. St. Francis of Assisi would kneel for hours, crying before the tabernacle, whispering, "Love is not loved." St. Clare, though sick and weak, faced invading soldiers by lifting the blessed sacrament. The enemy fled, not from her strength, but from the radiance of Christ's presence. St. Carlo Acutis, a teenager of our own time, said, "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven." He built websites to share every Eucharistic miracle known to humanity, because he believed that if people could see what he saw, they would never treat the Mass as ordinary again. And Padre Pio, the stigmatized priest who bore Christ's wounds, spent hours in tears after each Mass, because he said he felt the weight of Calvary all over again. The saints remind us that the fire of the Eucharist is not meant to stay hidden in the host. It is meant to ignite hearts. We cannot encounter divine fire and remain the same. When you kneel before the Eucharist, you are kneeling before the same Christ who said, "Behold, I make all things new." But that renewal comes through purification. The closer we draw to the Eucharist, the more the hidden sins of our hearts begin to surface. Anger, pride, lust, resentment. Not to shame us, but to be burned away. Many people fear this fire because it exposes. But that's exactly how healing begins. Just as gold is purified in flame, our souls are refined by the fire of His presence. When you spend time in adoration, you begin to notice the difference. The restlessness fades. The confusion clears. The heart becomes still. Because where Christ is adored, the soul begins to breathe again. From Argentina to Mexico, from Poland to India, the same mystery continues, the host turning into visible flesh and blood. In one case, in Buenos Aires, the consecrated host was dropped accidentally. Placed in water to dissolve, as the Church prescribes, it began to bleed. It was sent for scientific examination. The result, human heart tissue, again, type AB. A heart that had undergone trauma, as if from being beaten and pierced. Think about that. Even in the laboratory, even under a microscope, God allows His love to testify. Science sees data. Faith sees a message. This is my heart, broken for you. Every miracle echoes Calvary. Every manifestation is a reminder. The cross is not in the past, it lives in the Eucharist. To love as Christ loves is to bleed. To give everything, holding nothing back. That is what the Eucharist reveals, love carried to its extreme. But in our world, we often prefer comfort to sacrifice. We forget that real love demands a price. And so, when the Eucharist bleeds, it is heaven showing us again what love costs. In that sacred blood, God is saying, "This is what I gave for you. Will you not give me your heart in return?" He doesn't ask for perfection. He asks for surrender, for trust, for love that stays, even when it's hard. The Church is going through purification. Not punishment, but mercy in disguise. Because before renewal comes, there must be fire. The same Jesus who cleansed the temple now cleanses His Church, not with whips, but with fire. Through suffering, scandal, and silence, He burns away what is false, so that what is true may shine again. The Eucharistic miracles of our time are part of that purification. They are heaven's way of saying, "You have forgotten who you receive. Return to the fire of the altar." When the Church kneels again before the tabernacle, the world will see light again. Because the fire that purifies the Church will also heal the world. The Eucharist does not call only saints. It calls sinners, all of us. You don't have to be perfect to kneel before Him. You only have to be willing. Willing to be loved. Willing to be healed. Willing to begin again. When you go before the blessed sacrament, you may not see miracles. But if you stay long enough, something greater will happen. Your heart will change. The fire that purifies will enter your soul. And you'll begin to see not just with your eyes, but with your heart. The world needs this fire again. Not the fire of destruction, but of divine love. A love that heals, restores, and transforms. Every time the host bleeds, every time a miracle happens, he is whispering, "Come closer. Let my love burn away your fear. Let my fire make you new." There comes a moment in every journey of faith when silence becomes the only fitting response. Not out of confusion, but out of awe. Because what do you say when the eternal enters the temporal, when God, who needs nothing, chooses to make himself bread for the hungry, light for the lost, and love for those who thought they were beyond saving? We've followed this story through mystery and revelation, through doubt and divine encounter. And now, we stand before the heart of it all, a light that never goes out. A miracle that does not fade with time. In the small town where the Eucharistic miracle occurred, pilgrims began to arrive. At first, a handful. Then dozens. Then hundreds. They came from every corner of the world, not because of the spectacle, but because of the silence that surrounded it. In that silence, hearts were stirred. Confessions were made. Tears were shed. The parish priest, once overwhelmed by disbelief, now stood humbled before what he could no longer explain away. He recalled the night it all began, when the host, once white and fragile, began to change. When it became something living, something sacred. He had doubted. But now, his doubt became the soil from which deeper faith blossomed. Months later, church authorities sent samples for scientific analysis. The results left even the most skeptical mind silent. The tissue, they found, was not a dead relic. It was living cardiac tissue, from the human heart. The muscle fibers showed signs of stress, the kind seen in someone who had suffered extreme agony before death. It was as if the heart itself had remembered the passion. And it didn't decay. For years, under no preservatives, no chemicals, the sample remained incorrupt. Science could describe it, but it could not explain it. And in that gap between description and understanding, faith found its home. Now, each morning, when the priest lifts the consecrated host, there's a stillness that fills the air. Those who come to Mass no longer look with casual eyes. They see the altar differently. Because they've seen what the Eucharist truly is, not a symbol, not a reminder, but the living Christ himself. The same Christ who was broken on Calvary. The same Christ who said, "This is my body, given for you." He is not far away. He is here, every day, in every tabernacle, in every humble chapel where a candle flickers before the blessed sacrament. In the years following the miracle, something extraordinary began to happen. The parish that once struggled with emptiness began to overflow with life. Vocations to the priesthood rose. Families returned to prayer. Confession lines lengthened. It was as though the presence of Christ had awakened the soul of the town, calling it back from slumber. People who had lost faith began to believe again. Those burdened by guilt began to find peace. And those who felt forgotten discovered they were deeply loved. Because once you encounter the heart of Christ, you are never the same. There was a young man, one of the many pilgrims who came after hearing of the miracle. He had lived most of his life angry with God. He had buried his mother without saying goodbye, and he had sworn never to pray again. But when he entered the small church, the air was different. It was quiet, yet alive. He knelt, almost by instinct. Before him was the Eucharist, radiant, motionless, but speaking in silence. And for the first time in years, he wept. He said later, "It wasn't the miracle that changed me. It was realizing that he had been there all along, waiting. That is what the Eucharist does. It waits. For you. For me. For every heart still searching in the dark. My friend. What would it take for you to believe again? Not in the idea of God, but in His presence. Not in a story from the past, but in a reality that breathes here and now. Every Mass, heaven touches earth. Every consecration, Christ descends once more, not symbolically, but sacramentally. The same Christ who multiplied loaves in Galilee now feeds you with Himself. The same hands that healed the sick now reach for you through the hands of the priest. The miracle isn't just what happened in that town. The miracle is that He still chooses to come every day for love of you. Years later, that same priest, now old, with trembling hands, was asked what the miracle had taught him. He smiled faintly and said, "At first, I thought it was God proving Himself to us. But I see now, it was God reminding us of what we had forgotten. The Eucharist was always a miracle. We just stopped noticing. In the silence of adoration, time fades. There is no yesterday or tomorrow, only the presence." The saints understood this well. St. Thomas Aquinas called it the sacrament of love. St. Francis of Assisi wept before it daily. And St. Carlo Acutis, the young modern saint, called the Eucharist my highway to heaven. They all saw what we often miss. That every tabernacle is a Bethlehem. Every Mass a Calvary. Every host a heartbeat of divine mercy. And in that quiet, God whispers, "I am here. Always." Even now, the world grows darker. Faith is mocked, holiness forgotten, and truth treated as fiction. But in every darkness, the Eucharist remains, glowing with the same undying light that once broke the tomb open. Christ does not retreat from the world. He remains hidden within it, patient as ever. Waiting in the tabernacle for one more soul to kneel. One more heart to say, "Lord, I believe." And when that heart opens, even slightly, He enters with all His glory. So when you next pass by a church, stop. Even if for a moment. Step inside. Let the silence speak. You may not see a flash of light or a visible miracle. But you will find something far greater. The same presence that transformed a doubting priest. The same love that healed a broken pilgrim. The same living heart that beats for you. Because the Eucharist is not a thing to understand. It is a person to encounter. Christ, alive, waiting, loving, forgiving. And even when the world forgets Him, He does not forget the world. This is the miracle of miracles. Not that bread became flesh once, but that it continues to happen every single day. Every altar, every Mass, every moment when heaven descends upon earth. It is God saying again, "I will never leave you." And so, when the lights go dim and the church doors close, that small red lamp beside the tabernacle still burns. It burns for you. It burns for the world. It burns for love. Because the light of Christ, the light that became flesh and dwelt among us, does not go out. Ever. This is my body, given for you.